Hello, high school social studies teachers. Welcome to our 912 Social Studies Professional Learning. As with everything else these days, we're operating at hopefully a safe social distance. When I thought about my first year being entirely out of the classroom, also being entirely out of my office, I figured, it might be because I was fired or something. But yeah, this has been a kind of a difficult year. This screencast is really kind of meant to replace professional learning we would have done in person, and thankfully get you some time to plan for the fall, which right now, who knows if we'll be in an in-person context or operating via distance learning. Whatever happens, the idea of the professional learning modules that were set up this week is to really kind of get you, one, the tools that you need, but also the time to design, which is kind of a rarity in our system. And I think it's something we're trying to get better at as far as when we structure professional learning, make sure teachers have time to apply it. So that's really what we're going to be doing today. I have kind of three objectives, and I'm going to move through this hopefully as quickly as I can. But I did want to give you some updates on curriculum and instruction for high school social studies. That will not take long. For example, we've already hired all of our teams for summer work, so thank you to those that applied. But really, we're going to try to, like I said, blend the learning for social studies with other stuff that you've been learning about this week. And we have produced our content in relative isolation. We talked about things that were maybe common notes we wanted to hit, but if you notice some things are disjointed, it's because we haven't been able to collaborate much either. But I think it's a good effort to really kind of bind everything together. And I have office hours if you want to reach out to me and discuss, questions about digital literacy stuff or the professional learning from the district coaching leads or this screencast or slide deck. The slide deck is also available. Likely the same spot you clicked on to hear this screencast has the slide deck. So you may want to kind of go through that after this to make sure the links are active, because you can't click into the links in the screencast. Then finally, I have some tips for guiding lesson and unit planning in accordance with all of this stuff. There's already some shifts towards just really putting greater emphasis on the standards underway. We can do that in in-person or distance learning context. And so as we move towards maybe things like common formative assessments in the future that are, district-wide across courses, next year's a great chance to try out really kind of hitting those standards. Okay, so first off, by the end of this session, I'm hoping that you'll pick up some tips about how the instructional cycle really kind of, can best drive your learning, whether, again, it's in person or at a distance. Instructional cycle's been around for a while, but I thought it was the best tool to take all of the learning, from really like June 2nd, June 3rd, whatever's happening in your building, and kind of bind it all together to give you kind of a clear way to plan, for whatever comes. And then it's my understanding teachers did not have to complete all three modules, but you can see the titles there, like providing and communicating clear learning goals and so on. But the instructional cycle is a great tool for helping you make the most out of the one that you chose, or if you did all three, to really kind of bind it all together. And then our screencast will is supposed to take place on Friday, June 5th. You might get a chance to watch it earlier. I know I'm going to make it available. But then that day is really kind of given over to you planning for learning in the fall. And you might not be thinking about fall right now, but again, that gift of time is pretty significant, so it's great to get it. As far as updates, we've done a lot of curriculum work to align our teaching and learning to the Iowa core standards, which go live next year in the fall. So we've been, incrementally taking the steps the state has suggested for us to become aligned with the Iowa core standards. And so world history and U.S. history were designed with those standards in mind, but they're still in a Microsoft platform. Additionally, Microsoft platform, any change in a link or a destination invalidates the link. Google, if for example, a link to a file in our system goes to a particular folder where there's a document in that folder, and then we change that folder or that document, those links stay live. So the good news for world history and U.S. history teachers is we're going to be porting all those files over to Google. You might notice some differences in formatting and things like that, but The goal then is to make sure that as many of those links are repaired as possible. If we can't repair them like they were to someone's, OneDrive, and that person doesn't work in our system anymore, we may have to just, remove those links. But it doesn't mean we've lost the document. It just means it may have to be found elsewhere. But those are going to, look a lot better in a Google environment. We're also going to maybe add some geography and civics connections, just kind of based on the professional literature put out by the National Organization for Geographers. How we use maps has really changed from, when I got into teaching a long time ago. United States Government Econ, these teams are meeting for only one day, and they're going to maybe make some revisions based on the experiences that the teachers had teaching the courses in fall 2019. Can't really use spring 2020. But if time allows, we're going to have some common assessments that will be developed again. The teaching and learning department's moving towards adopting common assessments for all core courses, but we're not going to launch that this year, especially during a pandemic. But it'll be great to have a kind of a bank of assessments ready to go should that come about. And then you're free to use them this year. And if you'd like to use your own assessments that are standards-based, feel free. But if we ever get to common assessments, they'll probably look like what those teams will put together. I've got an appointment yet to be scheduled with AP Psych. It's going to be our last course to get priority standards and learning targets drafted. But with that, all AP courses are up to snuff with the changes to those course exam descriptions. And then pending funding and time, there may be some work on current world issues done. It may be done entirely by me because I think I only know one or two teachers of the 3 or 4 that will teach it. But in any case, we'll draft priority standards and proficiency scales. That course will not have units of study. The units are current world issues. And so the teachers of those courses have that sweet and terrifying freedom that comes with teaching a course without a scope and sequence. But I would think right now they'd be kind of deep in looking at the pandemic. In the fall, they should be looking at the 2020 presidential elections, which have global significance. They should be looking at maybe the economic fallout or maybe restarting that's taking place in a pandemic. And so current world issues is going to have probably like a newspaper resource as its primary text, probably like subscription to Washington Post for each kid or something like that. But it's going to be a very dynamic course. No 2 semesters will be the same. Hey, first objective's done. So this instructional cycle is really tied to that idea of taking the work of June 3rd professional learning modules and bringing it to you in a way that we think is going to be best for teaching and assessing. And a lot of teachers have really made this shift to teaching like this. They look at the objectives, goals, and standards for their course. They even share those goals and standards with students. They do some modeling of instruction. They maybe have students practice maybe in groups with difficult concepts. They maybe take some temperatures about formative assessment, which you can see is all over the instructional cycle. They change their teaching as a result of the data from those assessments, even if it's just a quick thing of how many of you getting this? Oh, 2/3 aren't? Then I better kind of find a different way to reteach it tomorrow. They might do some formal formative assessments and then analyze that data, and then they might find that, okay, so I've got maybe 8 students in class that are kind of like situation critical, but I've also got some really talented students that are beyond the standard, and that's going to have implications for my planning. So that's what this document or this image really means. And now to put the June 3rd learning with it, you can really kind of append it to various parts of that cycle. So if you did providing and communicating clear learning targets, you're especially doing that at the beginning, but also at different check-in points along the way. Assessment for learning, we saw, hits everywhere. And if you have questions about these modules and you want the quick version of assessment for learning because you've had a lot of learning in that, you chose not to do that module, but you want to check in and get the 5-minute version from me, you can check into my office hours. But this is how those professional learning modules really append themselves to the instructional cycle. So looking at direct instruction over there, like this is where we've got teachers, again, doing some modeling or maybe working with groups of students to show how you go about like analyzing an image, for example, or how you write a statement that communicates change over time. Not just talking about some stuff that was then and then talking about some stuff that came after, but to really draw out the types of things that happen in history that makes an event a turning point or a moment of change. And then, of course, again, assessment for learning is all over the place, and that's why it has that prominent place in the center. Okay, so as guidance of lesson and unit planning, this is not meant to insult you or indicate that you don't know how to do this after maybe many years in the profession. What it's meant to do is to say, look, if we have to think in terms of a distance learning environment, this spring it was voluntary for high school. It will not be voluntary in the fall. We are required to have a plan ready to go, so any closure means that learning proceeds uninterrupted. And that might even involve synchronous get-togethers and meetings with your classes. It may involve asynchronous stuff, but it has to be rooted in the Iowa core standards, the 8 Iowa teaching standards. And so we've really kind of got a burden there to plan. And that's the whole point of getting you so much time to really kind of create, your first instructional cycle-based lesson for fall, again, delivered in either in-person or distance learning context. So when you do this, first you want to look at priority standards and learning targets for your course. And again, just about every course has that. And by fall, they're all going to have it. The only ones we're missing them for is philosophy, which is taught at one school, AP Psych, and current world issues, which we actually have priority standards. We just don't have the accompanying learning targets. You can look to the common assessment templates to see how the curriculum team thought a teacher might go about, guiding students through the work with the device, and then maybe having them practice it in groups, and then, doing it on their own. But those tools are really meant to help them out. They don't have to be used at this point, but they are good tools. Then you go in to find our fall unit of study. And I was going to link in my slides out to Canvas, but you should know how to get there by now. And Canvas remains our spot to keep curriculum documents. Well, I think teachers are really kind of, jumped into Google Classroom. Canvas is the place where we store curriculum documents. Then finally, it's not so much that you need to plan the whole unit, but to plan a cycle of instruction using a standard, an assessment or series of assessments, and then activities from that unit of study to link up that standard and assessment work that you could practice, with students even at the start of the year in an in-person context, saying, if we had to do this at a distance, what would it look like? Or just go all in on the distance learning, and if you're of the assumption we won't be here in the fall, that'll prepare your kids well. So getting into that cycle of instruction, you want to be thinking about the digital literacy tools that might be available. Like, for example, I know that there was some information on HyperDocs. Is that how you're going to ground your distance learning focus? How do you structure work so students get practice with the words and meaning of the standard? So, for example, if I were working at a distance, my Google Classroom would have a discussion, for the start of the unit saying, look, by the end of the unit, we want to be able to do this. And these are words and concepts associated with that. Tell me what you think it means. And then as the class builds their understanding around the standard, the teacher can then, jump in with some feedback and say, okay, so we had a lot of people that were right on target and anticipating what that meant. We had some that needed help. Here's a couple good posts from students that really kind of put it into student-friendly language. All right, let's go. And then structure a bunch of activities that move from that we're all doing it together to y'all are doing it maybe in groups or alone, whatever your preference is. But then there's an assessment of their independent ability to do it through the they do it alone. And then the assessments for learning throughout the cycle can be really informal. Tell me where you think you are on this from a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being that you super got it. Or it could be, I want you to write a paragraph that really gets at that change over time that we're looking at here and draw it out with a topic sentence and then provide evidence from the early to the late and keep doing that through the whole paragraph, and I'll get you feedback. So it's really kind of up to the teacher as to how they go about that process, but the instructional cycle can guide that planning in a way that allows you to know exactly where your students are. And if they are far away from school, we're going to need that data and that evidence to pop up. Okay. Optional add-ons to your planning. Again, think about digital literacy tools that have worked for you. As a person who didn't get to teach in a one-to-one environment this year, this is really kind of going to be one of those things that you can personalize. In one class of the same title, it may look one way, and across the hall it might look different. But if the work is grounded in the standards in the instructional cycle, can't really go wrong. And then reading and writing, super important, especially at the high school level. What we do with nonfiction text in social studies and other tools that we have in social studies, it's the stuff kids need, whether they're going to career or college life. They need to be able to write. We help get them there. No matter what their pathway is, we need to make sure that they can communicate in writing. And if we're stuck at distance learning, that's probably going to be a really good way to do that, so we don't have to listen to 120 student screencasts of our work. Okay, so final notes. Thanks for all your hard work while everybody was at a distance. click into office hours. Do send me an email first in case I'm away from my computer, but I'll rush back and get it. See you soon. Have a great summer.